Hello, hi. My name is Praveen Shah, and today I'm going to talk about Active Directory for Windows Server 2012 or R2. Uh, and this is for our final presentation for class CSIT448. And here you can see the index, what I'm going to be talking about, giving a short introduction of Active Directory and basics about Active Directory. Any hierarchical structures and its Active Directory's database, and YAML, which is flexible single master operations role, and its services. So let's go started my presentation. Active Directory introduction is just I came up with a little bit of structure here. It doesn't look good, but it's a focal point for manageability, security, and interior portability. And it has like Windows user clients and servers, and who can use those things from directions and from email servers, from applications, for like a network devices. What is Active Directory? First, I would like to talk about it is a Microsoft versions which maintains the relationship between the resources and enable them to work together. It provides a centralized repository for users' account information and directory authentications, authorizations, and assignment of right and permissions. And do I need Active Directory is a kind of questions. If I want to centrally manage access to resources such as printers, users, and groups, so this kind of further things to control users' accounts from one location, definitely we have an application that rely on the Active Directory. What are the basics of Active Directory? It is a domain naming systems, LDAP, schema, replications, global catalog, components of Active Directory. And domain naming systems is the hierarchical naming and domain name resolution system used on the internet and Windows network for naming resolutions. It covers the domain name into its related IP address. Active Directories depends of DNS. Both share the same zone naming conventions. If DSN server fail, it causes to fail Active Directory too. So very important. So LDAP is a directory access protocol which is used to exchange directory information from server to clients, and port number for LDAP is 389 by default. It was initially used for a front end in the version X.50, but can also be used with a standalone and other kinds of directory servers. Schema is very important. A schema acts as the building blocks of Active Directory. It holds all of the information needed to created user groups, computers, and so on within Active Directory. The schema defines the classes of the objects and allowed within a directory and attributes that are associated with those objects. These must be consistent across domain in order to security and policies and access rights to functions correctly. Defining the attributes once and using it for multiple objects allow for a standardized approach of defining objects. For example, attributes is name. Each attribute within the schema has to have a unique old object identifier. Schema classes, same thing. An object class is a defined grouping of attributes that makes up a unique resource type. One of the most common object class is the user class. Use the user object class as the template for a user account. When you create a user, the attributes that are defined for the user object class are used to define in the new account. Replication. What is a replication in Active Directory? It is actually a copy version of something. A replication is automatic synchronizations of data that occurs among domain controllers. A process of making two or more data storage devices of programs is called synchronization. And a global catalog is kind of maintains indexes about objects. It contains full information of the objects in own domain and partial information of the objects in the domains. And the port number for the global catalog is 3268. Let's talk about the component of Active Directory. And there is a two type of Active Directory component. There are logical components and physical components. Logical components has a domain tree, forest, and organizational unit, and site and domain controls are in the physical component. So domain is very important when you talk about the Active Directory things. All objects which shares a common directory database, trust relationship with other domain, and security policies is known as domain. Each domain stores information about the objects that belongs to that domain, and all security policies and settings such as administrative security policies, access control lists do not cross from the domain to another. And domains provide administrative boundaries for objects. Objects manage security for share resources and unit of replication for the objects. Trees are a collection of one or more domains that allow global resources sharing. A tree may consist of a single domain or multiple domains in a contiguous namespace. And adding a domain into a tree becomes a child of the tree. Root domain will be called parent domain to which a child domain is attached. A child domain can also have its multiple child domains. Child domain uses the name followed by a parent domain name and gets a unique domain name system. These are the kind of hierarchy I came up with, and examples. And the forest is a collection of what is forest? Forest is the collection of multiple trees that shares a common global catalog, directory schema, logical structure, and directory configuration. The primary security boundary for Active Directory is forest, which contains domain tree. Forests allows organization to group their divisions which use different naming scheme and may need to operate independently, but as an organization they want to communicate with the entire organization by sensitive trust and share the same schema and configuration container. The first domain you create in the forest is called the forest root domain. And the last one is organizational unit. It is a logical component of Active Directory and is used to organize users, groups, and computers. Let's talk about the physical component of the Active Directory. This site contains Active Directory resources that are all connected by the reliable high-speed bandwidth, a minimum of 10 megabyte. Site membership is used in the login process as a computer attempts to locate domain controllers in its own site first, and replication in accessing global catalogs, and in Exchange server managing infrastructure. Domain controller is a single computer or server that hold and control Active Directory database. It is the physical components of Active Directory and is used to control and manage the domains in an organizational forest. Active Directory hierarchical structure. This is a hierarchical structure. Forest root domain on the top, and forest has three main things: domain trees, and divided. Hierarchical structure, and there can be one or more domain trees in a forest. Through the first domain is designated as the forest root domain. A domain tree can contain multiple domains that shares a common namespace, and regardless of the number of domain trees in the forest, there is a centralized administration at the forest level, with permissions to all domain trees. Schema admins groups. Members of the group have authority over all the domain trees in the forest. All domain controls within the forest share in the schema. Now it's a database. Let's talk about the database in Active Directory. Active Directory stores its data in a file name called ntds.d. DIT format. In addition to using the database file, Active Directory uses log file that stores information prior to committing it to database, that are edb.log, edb.chk. During AD installation, Active Directory installation lets you specify alternative locations for those log files and database files. You can use the ntd sutil to move database to alternate location after the installation. So flexible single master operations is very important in Active Directory. So what are the roles? FSEMO roles are a specialized service within Active Directory that should be performed only by a single domain controller. There are 5 roles, which is schema master, domain naming master, infrastructure master, relative identifier master, RID, and then PDC, which is a primary domain controller emulator. All 5 these roles consist of one domain controller. You can move them so that they all run on their own independent domain controller. The schema master domain controller controls all updates and modifications of the schema. Once the schema updates is complete, it is replicated from the schema to all other DC in the directory. To update the schema of the forest, you must have access to the schema master, and the replication topology is a very useful command. Account lockout and management tool. This is also very important. Is actually part of the account lockout and management tools you can download from Microsoft. And account info all includes an additional property pages for the user account properties. These additional property pages will allow you to determine when your account's password was set, when the password expires, when the user last logged on, or of the domain, as well as other lockout information. I thought this information is very vital for IT major students, so that's the reason I wanted to capture this one here. And my references is I kind of collected from the Google, and Mastering Active Directory for Windows Server 2008, and MCSA, our textbook, complete study guide, Windows Server 2012. And I hope you guys enjoyed this my short presentations for the Active Directory for Windows 2008, and hope this is a very useful, and thanks a lot.